Good afternoon, one and all. I am Dr. Nimisha Kamli from Srimati P. N. Doshi Women's College. Wish you all on International Women's Day and welcome you all for the webinar organized by Women's Development Cell of Srimati P. N. Doshi Women's College on the topic History of Women's Rights Movements in the World by eminent speaker Professor Vibhuti Patel. French philosopher and writer Simone de Beauvoir, in her famous novel The Second Sex, has stated that one is not born, rather becomes a woman. Is quite thought provoking as it raises the question of women's identity, existence, and portrayal in the society. Society has gone through dynamic political, social, and economic phases, but women have always struggled for their rights. On this special day, let us know more about the history of women's rights movements in the world. I request our respected principal, Dr. Asha Menon, to give the welcome address.
Thank you, Dr. Nimisha Kamli. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the National Webinar on History of Women's Rights Movements of the World, organized by Women's Development Cell of Srimati P. N. Doshi Women's College, Ghatkopar, Mumbai. Let me first wish everyone a very happy Women's Day and then introduce my institution, which is 61 years old and is recognized as one of the top performing institutes in the country from Maharashtra by NAC in 2017. The vision of our institution is to educate, enlighten, and empower girls, and to be recognized as a center of excellence for education that empowers women, leading to self-actualization. Today's webinar on history of women's rights movements of the world is an attempt to understand the struggles women have gone through the years. The first attempt to organize a national movement for women's rights occurred in Seneca Falls, New York in July 1848. The women's rights movement was largely based in the United States in the 1960s and 70s and sought for equal rights and opportunities and greater personal freedom for women. Similarly, the women's movement in India has a checkered history of over more than 100 years. Women and girls today are living the legacy of women's rights that 7 generations of women before us have given their best to achieve. All these were achieved because a single movement which sparked a revolution, collective actions that transformed laws, creative expression which changed attitudes, and this altered the course of history. It's these threads that wove together to propel the women's movement even in the face of obstacles. I'm waiting to hear more from today's eminent speaker, Professor Vibhuti Patel, Madam, who is a well-known scholar in gender and women rights. A warm welcome to you, Madam.
Yeah, thank you.
I would also like to welcome all the principals, teachers, and participants who have joined us for this webinar. Wishing the webinar the very best, and I congratulate Dr. Rekha Randive, in charge of the Women's Development Cell, and her team for organizing this webinar on this Women's Day. Thank you. Over to Dr. Nimisha Kamble for further proceedings.
Thank you, ma'am, for your inspiring words. Truly, notwithstanding the efforts to improve the status of women in the society with the provision of higher education, voting rights, emergence of digitization, and for that matter, conquering the whole world, still, many of our sisters, daughters, and mothers need to be aware of their fundamental rights. Now I request in charge of Women's Development Cell and Vice Principal of Home Science Department, Dr. Rekha Randive, Madam, to briefly state the concept note of the webinar. Over to Rekha, Madam. Please unmute yourself, ma'am.
Thank you, Nimisha. Today's women are leaders. Everywhere you look, from the CEO who runs a Fortune 500 company to the a housewife who raises her children and heads her household. Our country was built by strong women, and we will continue to break down walls and defy stereotypes. Very rightly said by Nancy Pelosi. But this does not deny the fact that women Though women are empowered in our society, but they are still forced to fight for their rights. So, can we ask a question to ourselves? How much progress have we achieved, and how much do we need to work? If we go back to the history of women's rights movement in the world, the women have struggled for a century, more than a century ago. To begin with, as Principal Madam has already mentioned, in 1848 in US at the Seneca Falls Convention, women publicly petitioned for the political and religious rights. The struggle did not end there. It continued across the world for the period 1911 to 2015. In 1900, women gained the right to keep their earnings and household property. In 1920, women gained right to vote. In 1963, women gained right to equal pay for equal work. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act outlaws discrimination based on gender, race, or religion. In 1972, Title IX gives women equal rights to education programs. 1974, housing and credit discrimination against women is outlawed. In 1978, it becomes illegal to discriminate because a woman is pregnant. 1994, VAWA creates services to support victims of rape and abuse. 216, the military ends its exclusion of women from compact jobs. So if we look back at the history of women's struggle, we actually have come a long way, but we still have to work a lot, as women are still facing high risk of poverty. Even in the developed countries, women are suffering a lot of discrimination, which should be actually brought to the notice or attention of the government. But thanks to the digital age, a single woman's voice is now louder than ever. I would like to end by a simple quote of Rosa Luxemburg: women's freedom is the sign of social freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for briefing us with the concept note. And today's our speaker is really a distinguished person in the particular topic. And thank you, ma'am, for giving your time, valuable time to us. So not wasting much time, I would request Dr. Shobha Bharat to introduce today's guest, Dr. Vibhuti Patel.
Good afternoon to one and all. It is my proud privilege to introduce the very, very well-known Professor Vibhuti Patel, who is a gender economist and women's rights activist. Professor Vibhuti Patel has a doctorate in economics from the University of Mumbai, and she was awarded the visiting fellowship to the London School of Economics and Political Science from the Association of Commonwealth Universities, UK in 1992-93. She has authored and co-authored 12 books, edited and co-edited 9 books, and contributed over 100 papers as chapters in various books edited by others. She has also authored and co-authored 34 research monographs and reports. Her research papers, comments, commentaries, and reviews have been published in national as well as international academic journals. She has been a contributing member for many, many boards. I would just like to highlight a few of them. She is the member technical advisory group of UNFPA for the project Enhancing Male Participation for Improving Gender Equality in Maharashtra. She is the member expert committee for Mission on Science and Technology for Women, Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India, Delhi. She is a member of School Boards of Extension Education and Developmental Studies and the School of Gender and Developmental Studies, Indira Gandhi National Open University. She is also the member of Indian Council of Basic Education, Gandhi Shikshan Bhavan, Mumbai. She is also a member on the expert committee of School of Gandhian Studies, Indira Gandhi National Open University. She is again a member on many national advisory boards. I mean, the list is just quite endless, but since we are having a very short time with Dr. Vibhuti Patel, I would like to now invite Dr. Vibhuti Patel to start her lecture.
Good afternoon, friends. It is a post-lunch time, very challenging time to keep you engaged with this lecture. But I think the teamwork of Dr. Asha Menon, Dr. Nimisha Kambli, Dr. Rekha Randive, Dr. Shobha Bharat, Dr. Madhumita Bandyopadhyay, and Dr. Bhanudas Satam, I think it has seen to it that this such a important event is taking place, and it's a very historic moment because we are in a very important phase of the human civilization. And as Dr. Asha Menon told us that how in 1847 the Seneca Falls, and after that so many unfoldings that took place, and in 1910 when the whole world was just preparing to kill each other by the First World War, it was this women, heroic women, revolutionary women, women who had angst for the downtrodden and socially deprived sections. They were the ones who declared that we don't want bomb, we want bread. We don't want bullet, we want milk. And there should be peace in the world. And they declared 8th March as an International Women's Day in memory of the sacrifices and martyrdom of their foremothers. And I think the same legacy we all are continuing. And I congratulate P.N. Doshi College for Women team for choosing this topic, because it's very important to understand the learnings of the history. Those who don't, those who ignore the important learnings of history, there are also chances of repeating the mistakes. So I think the today's topic of capturing 200 years of women's movement, women's rights movement world over within 40 minutes is a Herculean task. But I think all of us, like, even if this lecture creates healthy curiosity about understanding the nuances and dynamics of women's movement, that would be a great achievement we all will have collectively. So mission of the women's movement, if we see that in the declaration of the International Women's Day only, it was very clear that women's movement is for sisterhood, strength, solidarity, and collective use of collective wisdom and collective action for social transformation to tilt the gender balance in favor of equality, justice, and peace. So historical legacy of this women's movement, it's mainly focused on challenging subordination, oppression, exploitation, subjugation, injustice, and discrimination against girls and women, with an aim to establish gender equality in all walks of life: economic, social, political, cultural, educational, and overall development of the human civilization. So the women's movement strives for liberation of humankind by challenging patriarchal control over women's sexuality, fertility, and labor, and that harms everybody, because it is any kind of a toxic patriarchy or aggressive patriarchy or a complete the very monolithic patriarchy always harms everybody. It is harmful to man, it is harmful to women, it is harmful to children, it is harmful to transgender people, because that creates devastation and destruction. All our human beings are brutalized by sexism and gender roles. I think I need not repeat this. There are thousands and thousands of examples to say that the society which ignores people, 50% of the population, or which is based on a total hierarchy and a pyramid kind of a structure, and who is there on the top of the pyramid is a lonely one man. So this kind of a structure doesn't help anybody. What women's rights movement wants is it's a circle, because circle, anybody can be as more people join, circle can become bigger and bigger. So if we see in the Indian context, if we see that it was in the between 12th century and 18th century, we saw so many expressions of liberation among some of the saint poetesses. Early feminists of the religious reform movement, Lal De in Kashmir, you should read her verses. You should listen to the recitation of Lal De's songs, which talk about, and she herself had such a painful life. Her in-laws were very cruel. She was tormented, she was driven out, she had complete disposition of all the worldly things she had, so much so that she did not even have clothes. Okay, and still this lady Lalde did not lose her faith in humanity. She wrote about such beautiful verses. She wrote about the human liberation, and we remember her even after 500 years. Another thing is that mystic poetry of Lal Deb, written between 1320 to 1392, are still extremely inspiring to all of us. Then Habba Khatun in Kashmir from the 16th century, 1554 to 1609, she was a queen, and she gave up all, she used all her resources as a queen to for the welfare of the society. And she was an ascetic. She led a very simple life. In fact, she moved from palace to the hut, and she wrote beautiful poems, and she was accessible. She did not believe in any discrimination of caste, class, rich or poor, and she talked about the spiritual enhancement. We all know about another princess, Rajput princess Mirabai, who was also married off at a young age, and she decided to dedicate her life to Lord Krishna. And in all verses of Mirabai, you see the quest for liberation of humankind. Anybody who invited her, whether it was a Harijan Basti or it was a peasant in this thing or artisan, everywhere she was just moving. And imagine those days when you had such a restriction on women's mobility. These women, they were moving in open, they were going and intermingling with the people, and nothing scared them, whether it was wild animals or very bad intention human beings. Now, in the Western society, if we see from the Europe, it was a Mary Wollstonecraft. We all know about Shelley. Shelley is a very favorite romantic poet for many of us. Mary Shelley was a companion of Shelley, Mary Wollstonecraft, and her book, Vindication of Rights of Women, with strictures on political and moral subjects, with vivid examples, she challenged the Victorian morality and double standards for men and women, and she asked for the quest for women to get educated, to get interested in science and music and art and craft, and this book had a massive ripple effect. In fact, all sensitive human beings, men and women, were so much impressed by Mary's work that later on, when we talk about the James Stuart Mill or John Stuart Mill, who are supposed to be father of liberalism, they were also influenced by them. Now, the suffrage movement, about which Dr. Asha Menon also told us, Dr. Shalini Bharat also told us, that the suffrage movement and the collective struggle of women workers in Europe and America that happened throughout 19th century and 20th century, and also the Seneca Falls Declaration. It is so moving. I think all of you should read. I have given the image of Seneca Falls, and when they gave this declaration, this picture of that declaration, at that time, they collected signatures of all those who suffragists. What were suffragists asking for? Because right from the time of Socrates and Aristotle, when they talked about democracy and when they talked about citizenship, it was meant only for men paying taxes. That means all those who were slaves and all those who were propertyless, like women were propertyless, because all the property laws were in favor of men, and only men could own property. Women were treated, slaves and women were treated as a property of a man. And suffragists who were asking for citizenship right for women, that was a very important, and we saw throughout Europe and America, they were making peaceful protests. Suffragists were never violent. In fact, society was violent towards them. They were mimicked, and there were jokes about them. They were called mad, and there were paintings about suffragists' house, which is not so like nicely decorated, because she's in the realm of ideas and they don't have a sense of dress, and they are so they are not decking up so nicely the way Victorian Victorian era women would be demanded to dress up.
Excuse me,
yes,
ma'am,
yeah.
we are not able to see the screen.
How come?
Can you share the screen?
I have shared the screen. I haven't shared the screen, madam.
Unshare and share again.
Okay, yeah, is it?
Yeah,
okay?
now it is visible.
Now, okay, should I make it full screen? Yeah?
Yes, complete.
Yeah.
So,
and ma'am, if you can even just give a look to the earlier slides.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So this is the first this thing, that how the women's movement is multicultural, multiracial. It is inclusive. It believes in the circular way of the vision of women's movement is that not in a pyramid. It was in a circular way, so that more and more people, all those who join, they are assimilated. Now, the mission of the women's movement I told you about, that it was in 1910, Clara Zetkin made a declaration in memory of the four mothers for their sacrifice and martyrdom. 8th March was declared as an International Women's Day. And after that, we have seen that so many women in different parts of the world who are working with the common working women, they were celebrating, commemorating, because they used to commemorate, because we are remembering the martyrdom. So we commemorate, like Jallianwala Bagh, we don't celebrate, we commemorate for what happened during pre-independence period. So commemoration of Women, International Women's Day started happening right from 1910, and we saw that women's movement also the reflection of the same spirit we saw between 12th century and the 19th century among several saint poetesses of India. Okay, so like Amir Khusro was a man, but Amir Khusro's verses also talk about giving and mutual respect and platonic love and romantic love. But we saw specifically Lal De's work in Kashmir, and Habba Khatun, who was a queen, and she started staying in a hut, and she wrote so many verses. Still now also Kashmiri people, they recite them, and they are so inspiring. Same was the inspiring poetry and verses of Mirabai. They lived through their example, their personal life, whatever they believed in, whatever they portrayed in their verses and in their poetry, and they lived that life of simplicity, mixing with the people, not non-discriminatory behavior. And similarly, we also saw Behnabai in Maharashtra, Mahadevi Akka in Karnataka, and several other saint poetesses in those 500 years. So at one way, in history, we are called the 12th to 18th and 19th century is considered to be a dark, it's a medieval dark history, no? We always call them, but actually so many things, that is only from the point of view of the rulers. But when it came to when it came to the common women, there were so many nice things were also happening. Now about suffrage movement, a lot has been written and said, and that's why people also say that it is basically the working class women who gifted International Women's Day to women of the world. And it was only after it got official stamp in 1975, where United Nations adopted, and the 165 member countries also adopted 8th March as the International Women's Day. So it did not remain only for the working class women, but it became the women of all countries, and women of all socio-cultural economic backgrounds started celebrating. And there was a celebratory aspect also, because the empowerment and so many successes were also being celebrated on this day. So anti-World War song, you must have read this in YouTube. You can hear, listen to several versions of this song. It's extremely popular song. It was written in 1910, where as we go marching, marching in the beauty of the day, million darkened Christians, 1,000 miles of gray, are touched with all radiance that a sudden sun discloses. For people hear us singing bread and roses, bread and roses. So these women were saying that we don't want gun, we don't want tanker, we don't want bomb, we don't want rifle. What we need is a bread and roses. Roses as a sign of peace and friendship, and bread is a basic requirement of every this thing. As we go marching, marching, we battle to for men. Means we are not fighting for our own rights, we are fighting for the rights of humankind, because they believe that without liberation of humankind from the shackles of slavery and restrictions and constraints, women can't get liberated, and without women's liberation, liberation of humankind can never happen. So and they are fighting for their women's children, and we mother them again. Our life shall not be sweetened, but from birth until life closes, hearts starve, and as well as bodies. Give us bread, and but give us roses. So we want bread also, and we want roses. We also want peace. We just don't want bread by any means. We want a bread which is which gives us dignity, which gives us harmony. As we go marching, marching, we bring the greater days, for the rising of women means the rising of the race. No more the drudge and idler. Some people are not doing anything, other people are overworking. We don't want that kind of society. Then toil where one reposes, one reposes, but the sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses. Now, what we saw that over this last 200 years, there have been several different understandings of women's question. What are the reasons for roots of women's subordination? Why does violence against women happen? Why do women don't get equal opportunity? What are the structural constraints we see? So those who believe in constitutional guarantees, they are considered to be liberal feminists. That's what the suffragists wanted. What they wanted was that constitution, equal right as a citizen. Okay. While the Marxists, they see the location, they said because the society is based on hierarchy, it is based on inequality between worker and capitalist and bourgeoisie and proletariat, that is the major root for women's subordination also. Radical feminists, which the trend which became extremely popular in 1970s, which talked about, which for the first time question of violence against women they raised, because there were so many important studies, whether it was a Kate Millett who wrote Sexual Politics. We had a Germaine Greer, herself a rape survivor in Australia. She wrote a book. She did PhD also on rape. And she wrote a book, Female Eunuch, How the Society Takes Away Your Femininity and Makes You a Eunuch through by use of violence. Then we had Susan Brown Miller, who did a massive study of rape survivors against our will and came up with a very striking, all these radical feminists, they came up with an extremely memorable phrases and slogans, because even that time, like when they wrote these things, we were in college, but their speeches would always register in your head and heart both. While when Susan Brown Miller says rape is nothing but a weapon in the hands of man to keep women in perpetual state of subordination, terrorization, humiliation, and subjugation. And everyone remembered. And sometimes they made some extreme statements also, that every man is a potential rapist. And I think you must have seen in 1980 in Marine Lines, all the walls where some of the anonymous people had painted the walls writing every man is a potential rapist. No? So this kind of extreme statements also were made by radical feminists, but it also gave a shock therapy to civilization. Earlier, any time a violence against women happened, it was treated as a personal problem of the person, and there was always a victim blaming. People would try to find fault with women. While first time, like because of the efforts of radical feminists, violence against women started getting treated as a social problem of the country, and combating violence against women become a national duty. And that's why you can see all the laws in our country, whether it is a law on Indian Evidence Act on violence against women, Domestic Violence Act, or Act on pornography, Act on child sexual abuse, state takes the responsibility. Okay, Nirbhaya's case, when Nirbhaya was gang raped, it is the Indian state, Indian government took the responsibility. No, so that is a very important contribution which radical feminists made, that patriarchy creates the major contradiction in social relations, and we need to abolish patriarchy. We have to challenge the patriarchy, which we should challenge patriarchal control over women's sexuality, who is a good woman and who is a bad woman, who is a virtuous woman and who is a vamp. This kind of a division of women they come up with the double standards of sexual morality. They also control women's labor, and they also control women's reproduction, because how many children to have, at what interval to have, whether to have children or not, everything is decided by the patriarchal norms of that country. Why certain countries want only one child norm? India, why certain countries want women to produce 8, 10, 12 babies? Today, just now, another webinar is going on. There is a lady, Roxana, she's from Romania. In her country, women get reward for producing more than three children. So pro-natalist and anti-natalist policy, who decide? Does anyone ask women whether she wants how many children? No, it is the state which decides, and it's a patriarchal state. Another very important trend in feminism is a socialist feminist, those who think that any form of hierarchy based on caste, class, race, religion, location, language, everything we have to combat. We have to create a egalitarian society, and we have to understand the structures of patriarchy. They are called socialist feminists. In India, most of the feminists who are very vocal and visible, they all belong to this trend. psychoanalytical feminists. There were department of many feminists in psychology departments. They also challenged Freudian thinking of Electra and Oedipal complex, because they said it's nothing. Freud was a misogynist, because all those women who came to Freud confided in him their personal problems of violence and incest and child sexual abuse. Freud listened to them. Freud was very different, because Freud did one good thing by bringing the whole so-called behavior, deviant behavior, in from the realm of cruelty and violence to the realm of dialogue. Because before Freud, any person who behaved so-called abnormally was treated, they were changed, they were chained, they were caged, they were whipped, they were branded. But Freud says, no, all of us have our past, all of us have our baggage of and childhood experiences of 0 to 6 age group play very important role in determining what kind of personality, what kind of phobia, what kind of fears, what kind of limitations or positive your personality will have. And that is acceptable to the feminists. But when Freud says that women have a penis envy, or women are nothing but a mutated man, that kind of this thing thesis and the misogyny of Freud is not acceptable, because Freud says that anything which women and children say needs to be taken with pinch of salt, which is totally wrong, because all those women who were telling him about their personal painful experiences, they were not fantasizing, they were not dreaming, they were actual real experiences. And it was the feminist who worked with the survivor of violence during 70s and 80s, and they started doing participatory action research. They wrote the book, like Juliet Mitchell's book, Psychoanalysis and Feminism. It was a path-breaking contribution, which says that Freud was wrong when he says that women and children hallucinate. Child sexual abuse happens. It happens in a widespread way. But Freud says it was a dreaming, it was a bad dream of the children. So the psychoanalytical feminists have even emphasized that you should not see women as a mass. Okay, each person has individual journey. That individual journey of a person makes that person, and then when they come into collectivity, when they start reflecting on their past and come to a new understanding, then they are able to shed whatever baggage they had, and they emerge as a more confident human being. Postmodern feminism, which became very popular in the 80s, 1980s and all, they say that we should challenge all hegemonic discourses and bring out the knowledge of the subjugated people. Who are subjugated, who don't have voice, who are invisible, who are not allowed to speak. These are the people who have been silenced. So the survivor of violence are silenced, unemployed people are silenced, people who are called mad, no, they are silenced. Like in the 80s, when I was a full-timer of a women's center, every day in-laws will bring a newly married bride, and they would say that we have got this our son married to this woman, and she's mad, she's mental, she's mental. There was nothing mental, because it was a totally different kind of setup in which she came. She had a lot of freedom in her parents' house, she's educated, and here the expectations of in-laws are very different. She's continuously trivialized, and she's insulted, and she's not allowed to talk to her friends, and it's under this kind of a psychological, emotional, and sometimes even physical violence that these women had withdrawn completely. But so we need to link mental health also with the power. All those who are powerless, they are going to have more problems in terms of. So postmodernism, when Foucault and Derrida, when they wrote there, they say that what we need to decenter the discourse from the dominant discourse, which is talking about the official discourse, and what is the knowledge of the subjugated people. Those who have been silenced, give them voice. Okay, and that postmodernism became extremely influential, not only in women's studies, in social sciences, but also in architects, school of architecture, and then in medical sciences, legal sciences, law schools, everywhere postmodernism became and currently also it is highly influential trend. Then we also come to a very important school of thought in women's movement. It is called ecofeminism. Now, ecofeminism was influenced by the struggle in Tehri Garhwal way back in 1972, where under leadership of Gaura Devi, women challenged the development discourse. Tehri Garhwal, they were coming up with a big thermal plant. You know that it's a Himalayan valley. And after and they also started, the timber industry also started arbitrarily felling of trees, which created tremendous ecological imbalance and climate change in Tehri Garhwal, and there were landslides and fields after farms were destroyed, villages were destroyed. There were the water tables in the streams and lakes and rivulets and tributaries started drying up. The land in that whole area, they became very fragile, and there were women who are who have a responsibility of collection of fuel, fodder, and water. They were not getting anything because the commercial interest had come up. New forest laws did not allow the local people to even use the forest produce. They were criminalized. Women were raped, and the forest timber merchants who hired men of their community on a daily wage basis to fell the trees. Many of you must have seen a movie called Noori. In that they show how the men are hired as a daily wage earner. And the same at the time of giving wages in the evening, the same table in which they keep the rupee notes to give to as a wages, they would have a bottle of alcohol. And whatever wages, 80 rupees or 60 rupees these workers got during the for whole day's labor would be used for alcohol. So this alcoholism created indebtedness. And so many girls from those villages were supplied as a prostitute. They were supplied as a sex workers because the Himalayan girls are fair looking, and there is a great demand in the red light areas in all major cities of India. So the trafficking of girls started happening in a big way. And this kind of 7 types of destruction which happened, which forced these women to challenge that this is not development, this is a destruction. Similarly, in different parts of the world, in Amazon, Sister Mary was fighting against destruction of river Amazon by by throwing off pollutants, industrial pollutants in that deforestation that was happening in Latin American countries. They were fighting. In Minamata, the fisherwomen, they started fighting against mercury poison being released in the sea, and the fisher folks using that water, and the fish started dying. All the sea lives just got destroyed, and the fisher folks started getting various types of carcinoma, and also the mutation of the babies which were formed, genetic mutation. So the limbless children without hands and legs were born. They are called jellyfish babies. Similarly, in Fiji Island, also women started demanding the nuclear testing which was taking place in in the sea. That had also created tremendous radiation in the Fiji Islands, and women started talking about living in harmony with nature. The way the 20th century capitalism was in the name of conquering nature was experimenting and messing up the human and natural life. There was a uproar against that from several parts of the world. An Indian scientist, Vandana Shiva, who had been to Tehri Garhwal as a student, she learned a lot from these women, and she wrote a book called Staying Alive. In fact, Madonna also got inspiration to write a song, Staying Alive. Many of you must have heard it, but you should read the book Staying Alive, which is there on internet, and you can also listen to the lectures on YouTube by several ecofeminists. Black feminists became very vocal, especially in the 20th, later part of 20th century, especially the Alice Walker, who wrote A Color Purple. And they said that 500 years of slave trade, okay, it did not allow any kind of destruction of Black culture, mainly because of the resilience of the women. They took them and exported them to 65 countries to build the colonial empire. Families were separated. Husband was sold in Fiji Island and wife was sold in Caribbean island, and complete devastation happened. They were whipped continuously. These women were raped. Ethnic cleansing was happening in a big way. In spite of that, these women, they did not allow African food, African cuisine, African songs, African batik, African handicraft to die. It was only the oral history. These women, after whole day's hard labor, They were singing lullabies to their children. They were telling them about the whole African legacy, what kind of life the forefathers and foremothers had, and they kept the culture alive. And they said they said that let us not do only breastfeeding. There is a celebration. We should celebrate our resilience of women and our foremothers. And also womanism is a currently extremely fashionable trend. You must have known that in Hollywood and in so many creative people, womanism is a very important thing. And they say that feminism always focuses on oppression, exploitation, deprivation, injustice. But what we need, that we need to celebrate the resilience, bravery, and determination of women. So all these important trends are currently also prevalent, and all of them, they interact with each other. Feminism, one good thing with the women's rights movement is that just because you differ with me, you don't become my enemy. We all want social transformation. We all want a society based on justice and peace, and we all are that way. We all are friends. We are the fellow travelers. Post-colonial feminism became very powerful, especially in the countries which had experience of colonialism of 200 years, 300 years. India had experience of 150 years of colonialism. So post-colonial feminism, they say that the Western feminist or a white women always see women from the developing countries only as a victim of oppression. And they think that there is a big brother who will civilize all of us. That is really wrong way of doing, because post-colonial feminism is skeptical about the universal sisterhood. They say that whatever said and done, we can't forget our past. We can't put our past under the carpet. Colonialism happened, exploitation happened, racism is there. We can't forget color of our skin. Okay, so intersectional marginalities, which are based on gender, social class, race, ethnicity, and also sexual preference, that there are people who have a different, who are sexual minorities. So post-colonial feminism incorporates the ideas of all and indigenous feminist movements, whether it is a tribal movement or a Dalit movement or movement on ecological questions by the local farmers and all. And then now we also talk about the transnational feminism, that we should not keep our feminism limited to our own country. We should transcend the boundaries of solidarity, and we should, it also emerged out of the post-colonial feminism and women of color feminism, which critique the idea of sisterhood is global, but it also says that the globalization is a fait accompli. All the world capitalism, transnational corporation, multinational corporation, they are global. So we who are at the receiving end of the system, we also need to have a transnational solidarity. The first wave of feminism that happened, like especially in South Asia, if we take the South Asian countries, and where the first generation of English educated women, they fought against child marriage, they fought against female infanticide, they fought for the rights of education, they fought against sati, custom of sati, they fought against the witch hunting and witchcraft and superstition. Now, the journey that began in the 19th century social reform movement with persons like Jyotiba Phule or Maharshi Karve, Savitribai Phule, Pandita Ramabai, Tarabai Shinde, all of them, they played a pioneering role. And in the 20th century, we saw the freedom movement in which Sarojini Naidu, Kamaladevi Chattopadhyay, we had 15 women who played a pivotal role in framing Constitution of India along with Baba Sahib Ambedkar. So it resulted into because of their efforts, we got constitutional guarantees of equality, freedom, equal opportunity for women, irrespective of class, caste, creed, race, religion, under the leadership of Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar. Well, in 1970s, but in the post-independence period, what we saw with all these lakhs of women who came out for India's freedom, who were so brave during Quit India movement. Many of them, like the most articulate of them, some became dedicated their life for building education, in educational institutions, hospitals. Some joined the bureaucracy, some joined foreign diplomacy, and some of them, very minuscule number of them, joined politics also. But large number of Indian women, they became homebound in the post-independence period, and the middle class women got the right to education. Most of the middle class families sent their daughters to schools and colleges. But it was in the 70s when so many social movements started happening world over, and also in our country. Like world, where there was a solidarity for Vietnam, tiny little country in Asia, which was extremely brutalized by American invasion. There was a global solidarity from all over the world. And the photograph of a woman, a Vietnamese woman, she has a gun in one hand, baby at the back, there are tears in her eyes, and she's just looking at the plane which is throwing napalm bomb. You know, napalm bombs are very devastating. They enter, there are pokes, there are very small blades in it, and that gets into your skin, and after going there, it bursts. So it's extremely painful. You die with tremendous pain it gives. So napalm bombs, America was using napalm bombs against Vietnamese population. And this created a tremendous revolutionary fervor among the students came out. Thousands of women world over, not only from Europe and America, but from all Asia, Africa, Latin America. They were highly enraged by seeing that highly moving poster. I don't know, it used to be there in our times, but I don't see it even in Google. That poster is not there, but very moving poster. Someone has made a painting based on that poster, but it's not so effective as it used to, the original picture was. So that created this thing, and these women, they realized that all these movements which are talking about social transformation, when it comes to women's question, they are always silent. They don't want, they think that automatically women's status will enhance, which is not true. And in 1972, Esther Bostrup, an economist from Denmark, did a study on African polygamy, and she came out with a understanding that African women are the backbone of food security in Africa, and we should not treat women as a recipient of the crumbs thrown at them. They are not the sponge. They are not living off the system. They are the major contributor to the economy, because most of their work which they do is not valued, but it is extremely important to run the economy, because women do largely unpaid work. And United Nations, which commissioned 165 countries to write the status of women's committee report, that report also showed that women constitute one half of the world's population. They do 2/3 of the world's work in the agriculture, in forestry, in subsistence production, in the craftsmen's places, in the artisan house, but it is not valued. So they do 2/3 of world's work, but what they get is 1/10 of world's income, and women control only 1% of world's property. Now, this is the thing which triggered a second wave of feminism, where the question of what do we mean by development, that was questioned. And what they say that development, the indicators of development should be education, health, and employment. And whether this development is and involving women. So the first approach which came was a women in development. Later on, person like Ela Van Wart says, what kind of development we want to integrate women into? The development itself is so hierarchical. Women are at the bottom of the economy. What we need to do is mobilize women. Women should self-organize and ask for their bargaining power, and they should create bargaining power, and they should ask for level playing field, which is called women and development. And the third, by 1985, we also realized that most of the studies showed that in all echelons of power, whether in politics or economics or cultural or educational field, men were at the helm of affair. And it is very important to sensitize these men that gender equality is not a zero-sum game between man and women. If a woman becomes empowered, if she gets equal opportunity, equal treatment, and equal reward, in no way men are going to lose, because it is going to support the household, it is going to be powerful for the community. for the nation and for the world. And that's what the whole gender and development approach that became. So these are three very important approaches which completely change the thinking of 191 nation states which are members of United Nations. So WID approach I told about, WAD and GAD also I told about to you. So the main concerns of the women's organizations in the second wave of feminism, which started from 1975, then we can say till 2000. Now, these 25 years were very important, where women took up questions of declining sex ratio. There are 80 countries in the world where proportion of women is less than that of men because of the patriarchy. The reasons may be different. Somewhere it is a sex-selective abortion. In some certain countries, there is a custom of female infanticide. In other countries, you have a discrimination in food and care and nurturance. But overall, the declining sex ratio is very important issue in Asian countries. Right to safe abortion as a backup service on demand by women, that was a very important demand of the Western countries and the countries in Latin America. Gender gap in education everywhere, it's a universal problem. There is a big gender divide when it comes to higher education and also enrollment, retention, and also development going ahead in education. Reproductive rights of women, because most of the countries talk about reproductive control of women. And women's rights movement says, no, it is not a question of control. Wherever you want, women are not like baby producing machines. Sometimes you want less number of children, then you would do forced sterilization. When you the countries which need more children, they just force women to go on producing babies till they die. This is not the kind of approach we'll allow. And that's why from reproductive control, they changed it to reproductive rights after ICPD, International Convention on Population and Development, a big gathering which took place in Egypt, in Cairo, which is called Cairo Convention. Fight against draconian population control policy, that you can't have, people are not just puppets, they are not just mechanical toys. They should have a right to decide what should be the family size. Violence against women like rape, dowry, murders, domestic violence, witch hunting, all of them were taken up very, very consistently, seriously by the women's movement world over. Portrayal of women in media, the sexist portrayal, pornographic image, the stereotypical image, distorted image of women was also a question, whether it was in advertisements or movies or plays or creative expressions. Unpaid care work, which is currently being discussed very greatly, that unpaid care work is very important. Recognition of women's work, both in the paid job, because most of the time women get paid job, which is extension of housework. So women are mostly in the service sector. And wherever women are in great number, wage rates go down, because that is the power of patriarchy. So non-recognition of women's work, invisibilization of women's work, anything that women do, like in construction industry, both men and women are working. Whichever task women are always classified as unskilled labor, though they are doing the same work. So even when the work of a similar nature they do, they are so there is a big demand that unpaid care work, and only some of the Scandinavian countries, Denmark and Iceland and Norway, they are the ones who count value of unpaid care work in the national systems of account, SNA, systems of national account. So where you do the counting of your gross domestic product, there are three methods of counting: income method, product method, and expenditure method. In all these methods, you have to show what is the value of unpaid care work they have done, and had this unpaid work not done, will your economy run? That's very important. Decision making of women in political and political participation are very important. In fact, the major learning of Me Too movement, Priya Ramani case recently, because when there was a defamation case by the accused of her rape, then it was so many women journalists, they also came forward and they said, yes, it happened with us also. Because she got a solidarity from other women journalists, she won the case, they all gave the testimony, she was not blamed. But what is the learning of Priya Ramani case? That we need more women in a powerful position. That is the only solution, whether it's a Hollywood or Bollywood or journalism or educational institution. We need more decision makers in a powerful position in the existing power structures, that we should have women. Then only their needs and aspirations, and we can also create an atmosphere which is safe and violence free. The question of alternate sexuality, those who don't fit into the heteronormative pattern, society ill treats them, they dehumanize them, they brutalize them, they trivialize them, and they also punish them in a very bad way. Now, after so many 20 years of effort by the transgender community and by the LGBTQIA community, we have been able to decriminalize the extremely problematic law, an extremely horrendous law, Section 377. And now we also have a Transgender Persons Bill 2019, which is also full of limitations, because if a transgender person is raped, the punishment is only 2 years, while in other cases, the punishment is 7 to 10 years, which is also pain is a pain is a pain. To whosoever it happens, I think we have to be equally sensitive. Plus, who decides your sexual identity, whether you are a woman or a man or a transgender? It is left to the magistrate and a doctor. Your self-identification, your self-declaration has no value. That is also objective. Now, feminist leadership and its strategy, like generally we see that in a women's rights movement, they believe in a collective experience, non-hierarchical uh, way of structures, and also everyone should have a right to speak. So there are small clusters you create, in that everyone knows each one by name and by face, and they all have a right to speak. And construction of knowledge is very important, that whatever activism you do, but you also need to construct. And from women's rights movement, what we got was a women's studies. So women's studies as an academic discipline becomes very important. You use the participatory technique for knowledge construction. Your knowledge is not ivory tower esoteric exercise, but whatever you see, what you experience becomes very important component in knowledge construction. Women's experiences, legitimacy of experiences becomes very important. We need to combine our theory and practice. The special interest groups can be so small clusters who are, because patriarchy is such a powerful institution, it has been able to exist for 5,000 years. It is very flexible, very easily fits into any kind of a social setup. So to understand the patriarchy and how its operations, we need to create special interest group, whether it's a media group or a documentation group or archives group or discipline-wise groups in home science and economics and sociology and history. Then also feminist movement always said personal is political. You can't divide your personal from political. Women's lives is intertwined, and currently we all are working from home, so we know what is our personal and what is our public. Just now you will be cooking and cleaning, and immediately after that you would be answering your boss. So there is a compartmentalization of personal and political is not acceptable to women's rights movement. When the world leaders talk about the world peace, the women's movement says that peace begins from home. If you are against any kind of a war, then the war between men and women also should stop. There should not be any place to any form of gender-based violence, whether it's a domestic violence or societal violence or gang rape or child sexual abuse. The sisterhood is powerful is one of the very important slogans right from 1970s. And another very important, women united will never be defeated. That is a slogan which came from the women's rights movement in Latin America. And women's movement believes in creation of networks, local level networks, state level networks, international regional networks and global networks for strengthening each other's morale, exchanging experiences, learning from each other's best practices. And also you must have seen the translation of song from Chilean women's rights movement against rape, because there the military was, mass rape of women were happening in Chile, and they came out with the song. And you must have known that now it is almost available in more than 200-300 languages world over, same tune, and they have translated this. So this kind of experiences are also learning from each other's successes and also best practices. The issues taken up by the new women's movement, in fact, they have fought against various forms of violence against women, unjust family laws, so many legal reforms we got right from 1976 Equal Remuneration Act to 2021, the new act, and even the time use. First time our country has come up with a comprehensive national level data on time use. What is the time you are giving for your personal work? What is the time you are giving for your care work? And what is the time you get for paid work? So this is called TUS, Time Use Survey. You can download government's report, Ministry of Statistics has published it, and which says that Indian women allocate 299 minutes per day for unpaid care work. Indian men are allocating 99 minutes per day for unpaid care work, that only under Corona, because the method which is used is the day you were interviewed, on the previous 24 hours, what did you do? So the study was conducted during 2019 when there was lockdown, where more men helped in housework. Okay? So these things are extremely useful for coming up with a very realistic policy for employment, for skills, for investment and also changing the social norms, changing the norms of gender-based division of labor. Care work is not only women's work, it is everybody's work. So the new understanding that has globally emerged is that reduce care work by bringing technology wherever the care work is hazardous. Okay, sanitation is hazardous work. Redistribute care work, because it's not only women's job, man, women, or boys, girls, all have to do it. And also reward care work. Those who are into paid care work, don't give them, like domestic workers or ayabais, don't treat them shabbily, don't give them less wages. And that work is equally important. Without care work, the economy cannot run. So this kind of a new, then the land and housing rights, you must have seen the heroic pictures of women farmers. And we have now organization called Makam Mahila Kisan Adhikar Manch, which is active in 18 states of India. And they are demanding recognition of women in the farm sector as a farmers. We just can't talk about them as a farmer's wife or farmer's daughter or farmer's mother or farmer's widow, farmers. No, they are themselves farmers. FAO has declared, Food and Agriculture Organization has declared, future of agriculture is in the hands of women. Women are the main supplier of subsistence production. Food sovereignty of all countries depend on women farmers. And the special needs of a single women, 11% of the households in the country are of single women. They are headed by single women, either divorced or deserted or separated or widowed, or women who are facing long-term migration. So they have also formed their organization called All India Ekal Nari Sangatna. So development agenda of the feminists, which critiques the trickle-down theory, which demands that bottom-up approach, and we all role. We need to have affirmative action, social security, social protection, and to create a level playing field. So equity is very important to reach equality. That's what is the perspective. So gender in the process of economic development, where we see that the critique which the Wangari Maathai, African feminist, made against the agro-business. And she said that hunger in Africa is not created by Africans. It was the faulty policy where the agro-business have messed up the subsistence production. They have, at a gunpoint, they have forced farmers to cultivate only strawberry and oranges and cherry and cocoa, because they want Cadbury, multinational companies want Cadbury and coffee and beverages for the Western world that they have done, and they have taken away the food security, the basic subsistence crop of Africa. When she said this, botany of Nairobi University, they called her mad. But she was imprisoned. But in 1985, when the conference took place, the women's rights movement from 165 countries demanded release of Wangari Maathai. Then only they would allow the conference to go ahead, and she was released. Later on, she was given Nobel Peace Prize. And her model which she created of Green Belt movement, she traveled across 65 African countries explaining to farmers, don't give away your subsistence production. Don't go for commercial crop at the cost of food security of your children. Don't starve your children. It's very important. Cash crop is not going to give you that kind of a sustenance. So we have seen that ideologically also the feminist women's rights movement has challenged the major, very hegemonic structures, and they have also brought in various plural thinking and of knowledge construction. And there is also the question of feminist economists have also started articulating their concern. Environmental concerns are very important, livelihood concerns, fight against sexual harassment at workplace, and also the challenging the class ceiling. Women in the corporate world, they are now challenging the class ceiling. And these women have become the movers and shakers in the system, and they have challenged 5,000 years of patriarchal rule in last 50 years. And they are using social media. There are several digital communities created. They have created alliances with LGBT movement. They have also connected themselves in the international debate and actors. And the women's movement has also successfully created solidarity. And some of the important writings of women's movement, which are translated in several Indian languages and by the global feminist also, I have given in this reference note. I have received a call from University VC office. I think I have to join SNDT Women's University's webinar. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. Hello, madam. Yeah. Stop share. Yes, ma'am. Hello.
Thank you, madam. It was a challenge to complete
know.
such a broad topic in
Correct.
such a short span of time.
Yeah, I know. It was
And
really a challenge.
it's like salute to you, ma'am. You have
Thank you.
covered so much, and it was really informative and enlightening. So
Yeah, I
many
know.
things you have covered.
Yeah, for me also it was a challenge. Thank you, madam, for the opportunity. And this gave me to organize my thoughts also, because 200 years of history one has to
And your
cover.
presentation was quite informative. Looking at presentation, we can learn a lot.
Yeah, I'll share the presentation. Definitely.
Yes,
madam.
sure, ma'am.
I'll
Sure.
share. So can I now leave for
Thank
the
you.
university?
Thank you, Vibhuti madam.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Yes, I'll request Shobha madam to propose vote of thanks.
Oh, very good. Then let it complete. Because now university's function has started at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
SNDT
Okay,
University.
fine.
Yeah.
2
Thank you,
minutes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yeah. Okay.
Just 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So a very good afternoon to one and all. At the outset, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all the trustees of SPRJ Kanya Shala Trust, especially Meena Ben Khetani and the director, Dr. Kundavalli, for their encouragement and support in all our endeavors. I extend my thanks to our dynamic principal, Dr. Asha Menon, for her continued initiatives and motivation and support to conduct different activities in the college. I would like to place on record my sincere appreciation to Dr. Vibhuti Patel for the wonderful insights into the theme of today's webinar. Ma'am, thank you so much for taking us through a fascinating journey into the legacy of women's rights movements through the ages with interesting examples. I was glued to it. Every minute was very, very interesting. I would like to express my thanks to Dr. Rekha Randive, Head Women's Development Cell, Vice Principals of different faculties, and the coordinators and team of Women's Development Cell for their wholehearted contribution and efforts. Heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Bhanudas Satam, Sir, and Hashmat Khan for handling the technical aspects to ensure the smooth conduction of the program. A big and warm thank you to all the participants for attending and participating in the webinar. Wishing each one of you a very happy Women's Day and hoping and praying for the empowerment of every woman to reach her highest potential. A big thank you to each one of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
We will end the session.
Yes. Sir, we can stop live streaming.
Yeah, live stream.
Yeah, it will take 20 seconds more to say the end of the session. Okay, so we are waiting for 20 seconds, and after that we'll stop.
Oh, 20 seconds.
By the time you can leave, those who want to leave, they can leave the session.
Who's Harsha Merchant? कौन है? हाँ निमिषा, who's Harsha Merchant?
I'm the
principal of Aisha Bai College of Education.
Oh yeah.
Oh, welcome, ma'am. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you for joining, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I'm a very good friend, and I like to listen Professor Patel. She's a wonderful personality. More you listen, more you become interested in all the subjects. Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting.
Thank you for joining,
Thank
ma'am.
you, ma'am.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I can end right now.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, sir.
End
We
the
can end.
session.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Live streaming, yes. Okay.